Thank you very much. Cool. So, hi, I am Tom. I'm a UX lead at a company called Sabre. Can everyone hear me all right, by the way? Yeah? So we are developing an artificial intelligence to help coach teams to work well together, which is a bit of a mouthful. Hopefully I'll make that a bit clearer a bit later on. So you'll probably expect me to be doing a talk on things like machine learning, natural language processing, data-driven UX. I'm not talking about any of that stuff, so sorry if that's what you came for. This is what we're going to cover. I'm going to go over the problem with AI, then how do we fix this? I'm going to talk a little bit about Sabre. Don't worry, I'm not going to go ages about it. How we designed for AI and what we've discovered so far, and then obviously some questions at the end. So history repeats itself. What I mean by this is I want you to cast your minds back to the early software development of maybe the early 90s to early 2000s. I was going to come up with loads and loads of different examples to show you, but you've probably all got some in your head already. Really, really badly designed websites, for example. The best way to sum it up is something like this. So something that does loads of things badly and nothing particularly well. And one of the main reasons for that being is that experts design for experts. So we had these very, very smart people building these things, building this software, building these websites, and they couldn't quite understand how people couldn't use their products, especially when there's no consideration of users, for example. And then obviously in comes UX design. A very good example of this in more recent times is something that might be a little bit overused, I don't know, but I'm still going to use it anyway, is Microsoft's artificial intelligence Tate tweets. So for some of you who don't know, it was a huge disaster. The idea is that they wanted to experiment and conduct research on conversational understanding. Tate would learn from conversations she had with people on Twitter and become smarter. Fast forward just 24 hours, and we arrive at Tate the Tormentor. I'll let you have a look at these. And the next one. These are, I had to pick very carefully what I was going to put here. It's kind of funny, right? It is funny, but also, to some people, it's quite offensive. And again, there's been no consideration of users whatsoever. I'm just going to skip this screen because, yeah. Chatbots, I was going to do the same. I was going to come up with some great examples of very bad chatbots. They're everywhere. I've yet to find a decent one. I think our founder summed it up best when talking about the problem with chatbots. You have high expectations. First they disappoint you, and then they break. And that's pretty much across the board what I've found. So what is the answer? UX design is the answer. UX design to the rescue. What am I talking about this? So just in a brief summary, designers need to be included much earlier in the process, so conceptual stage, rather than just coming in and doing some testing and all that kind of stuff. Work out, is this actually what we need? Do we need AI? Do we need chatbots? Are we just doing it because it's a buzzword? And considering how it's going to be abused, for example, like Tate tweets. Don't just design with data. We want I can't say this word. Qualitative research. So a lot of the times people go out and they're just gathering data. They build these chatbots, they put them out in the world, and stuff goes wrong. There's so much stuff to actually speak to real users about before you get to that point, which is what I'm going to cover in a minute. Have a clear idea of tone of voice. Going to cover this, and level of interaction. There we go. So what is Sabre? I'm just going to talk very briefly. I'm not trying to show off our company, but essentially our motto is work well together. We are taking all kinds of teams and trying to coach them to work well together. If you think of the progression of any type of humankind now, it no longer relies on a sole genius. Everything relies on teams, so whether it's curing cancer, whether it's sending someone to Mars, or just a much smaller scale, just people working in an office together. You all have to work well together. It's very difficult to actually get to that point. So we have two products. We have one called Base. This is the first one. This is way before I started there. And what it was originally built for was hiring managers. And what we'd do is you'd take a diagnostic survey, and we would take your values and your tolerance of other people's values within that team. and we could very, very accurately work out how well that team will work together. The biggest problem we had is that companies were buying base and using it on teams they'd already built, and they were scoring very, very badly. So they came back to us and said, hey, this is great, but what do we do with this? How do we fix these teams? Which is where CoachBot comes in. So if you've ever heard of executive level coaching, it's where they come into big corporations. They charge an absolute fortune, something about £10,000 a day to come and coach executives. We're taking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these coaches, and we're trying to make this available to all kinds of teams. But we've got some problems. So we've got 2 large diagnostic surveys for both Base and CoachBot. One of them's 70 questions long, and it's very, very difficult to get people to fill it out. The current product relies heavily on Sabre teams facilitation, so we have to be back and forth between each team member. It's quite demanding. And it takes a hell of a lot to try new features because it's not as easy to just test stuff. We've actually got to have it in the product. So there is an answer. I tried to come up with a really fancy name. Prototyping CoachBot didn't really work, but I kind of arrived on this. Faking a bot. So it's not just like me sitting behind a computer like, typing away. There's a lot more involved. So we needed a chat client. We needed a way that people were already talking, they were familiar with it. We weren't really testing that chat interface. We were kind of testing our products in the chat interface. So naturally, we went with Slack. We chose a mid-sized company, and we pitched it to them as a heavily supervised bot. We weren't lying to them. They knew what was going on, but they were trying to get them to pretend they were talking to a bot. So we took 3 teams to match our team personas. So one was almost an exec level. It was a managerial team. Then something a bit in the middle of the company, and then a big team that was a sales team. And we took 1 channel for each team with CoachBot, so it's just like a normal user on Slack, as a multi-channel guest. And we added to each one of the team's channels, so they each had their own groups talking. And we also had a Sabre buddy, so that could be anyone within the company who was working as a person to talk as a real person rather than just a bot. So this is our bot brain. I have to apologize for the quality of this picture. It's almost as if someone intentionally blurred out the content. I don't know who would have done that. But yeah, actually, this is all our secret weapon, so I kind of had to blur it out. But this is our actual physical bot brain. I made it a bit clearer for you. So the top few things, we've got base, CoachBot, and contextual. So these are kind of questions we've taken from all our different diagnostics, and we put them into stages. So I'll come on to this in a minute, but originally we were going to do days for how much interaction we wanted. But we chose to put it in stages just so we could alter the interactions. Below that, we've got toolkits. So toolkits is when they've done some kind of diagnostic. We have all this product ready for them to help coach them. We also wanted to test these. And something that we're currently doing is exercises, games, and challenges. Is something we're really trying to test on the fly. We're coming up with things all the time. And we needed a way to really test this easily. So this all goes into our bot brain. On this side is responses. So we had a whole section of how we would phrase these questions, how we would speak to people. So it's not just someone behind a keyboard. There's predetermined things we're going to say. And then the red there is the responses we were getting back. We had some interesting ones. I'll talk about them in a minute. So what's the benefits? You can be responsive to the user's needs. So maybe they're not happy with how the things are going. The buddy can speak to you, and we can tone things back a bit. We can quickly test new ideas, like our challenges and our games. And we're not data-driven. So it's that word again, qualitative. Yeah, we actually find out what's the problems that people have, how are they actually feeling about interacting with CoachBot. And lastly, Sabre Buddy allows for on-the-fly interviews, so we can jump in very quickly and we can find out anything we want without distracting too much from the actual work. So what we've discovered so far, tone of voice is one of our biggest things. Avoid too much personality, especially to begin with. Now, I think everybody does this when they start with some kind of chatbot. We jumped in, we were like cracking gags, we were putting out GIFs and memes and all kinds of stuff. Some people absolutely loved it, but it took away from the seriousness of what we were trying to do. And a lot of people, especially in the more managerial teams, hated it. And it kind of devalued what we were trying to do. So we very quickly cut that back down. So we brought it down to a very functional product where we can kind of tweak the personality a bit. again, setting expectations early. So not everything's going to be like Siri. Not everything's going to be like Alexa. Let the people know exactly what you can do and how you can help them. And lastly, primers for why we were asking specific questions. So something that we found was people just still didn't want to answer these things, especially like when you have a survey, for example. They still weren't convinced. We gave primers, like one of our questions is get people to talk about their team purpose. One of the primers we have is someone, a cleaner at NASA was once asked what his purpose was, and he said to put man on the moon. And it just kind of primes that kind of question. We go a bit more into a bit more detail than that, but you get where I'm coming from. Level of interaction. So offer the user a choice of interaction. So some people were absolutely in love with CoachBot from the get-go. They loved the whole concept of it, and they were back and forth chatting all the time. Some people absolutely hated it. And they would say stuff like, I'm not going to say the worst stuff they said, but a lot of swearing involved. A lot of stuff just like, hurry up, is that it? Are you done? Get on with it. So we decided to offer them a choice of how much you want us to interact with you, and you can kind of pick, and we can tone it to how they want. Make the interactions contextual, not generic. So we started off trying to offer these toolkits as a start, and people just didn't get what we were trying to do. When we very quickly gave them some feedback, for example, meetings was one we had. When we improved their meetings after 1 week, they absolutely bought into the product. And they said, what's next? I want to do the next thing. So keep it contextual. And learn when the users prefer to interact. Some people did it on the train on the way to work. Some people when they get home. Very rarely would people take time out of their workday to actually do this stuff unless it was specifically decided within our product, which again is team specific. They do it themselves. And again, set expectations. I can't stress how important that is. CoachBot is not super smart. It will be, but it's not at the moment. And lastly, this is a huge one, Escalation Protocol. So what happens when something goes wrong? You've probably had experience with chatbots where something's gone horribly wrong. How do you get up that point? How do you get put into, how do you get transferred to a real human? But I don't just mean when things go wrong. So someone recommended, well actually this is the next point, someone recommended me a chatbot. So have a way for users can escape from error traps. A couple of days ago, they recommended me a chatbot, and they said, this has got great personality. And I went in there, and I tried to be sneaky by using 10-minute mail, where you've got an email for 10 minutes. It's really cool. I tried to sign in with that, and it was like, yo, dude, we didn't recognize your email. I was like, oh, cool. Tried it again. Yo, dude, we didn't recognize you. Yo, dude. I was like, nope, just delete it. I didn't even get past that point. I couldn't stand it. So kind of just have a way of when something like that's happening to get people out. And lastly, having a buddy works really well for testing, interviews, and escalation. So not just the UX side. When something goes wrong, you can just jump in very quickly and fix that problem. And it's all done on a prototype basis. So you can make as many mistakes as you want until you get to a point where you're comfortable to start developing. We are still not there yet. We're very near to the point of putting this thing live, but we're not quite yet. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Tom. Any questions for Tom?
Executive coaching seems to be very personal and sensitive, and I wouldn't necessarily think it would be appropriate to have a chat box. How do you guys manage that?
Yeah, so it's not essentially a chatbot. It is an AI, and you are completely right. It is very personal, and something our product actually does is it's not available to anyone above them in the company. It's purely team specific. Only the team sees the feedback that's put into it. I don't know if you know like engagement tools and things like that. There's loads of them for different companies, and it just basically measures people, and people hate to be measured, right? All of the stuff we do there is completely private, and most of it is anonymous. We also have lots of different types of coaches. So we have big corporate, like meathead people who are like really dominant, and we have people that are really shy. All these different types of companies, and we're taking information from all these different coaches and how they work with these teams. And we're using the AI is eventually going to work out which best way to coach these type of people. Does that answer your question?
Thanks very much. Question at the back there?
Hi, Tom. So this sounds like layers and layers of protocol, is that right? Because it sounds like every time you're learning something, you're having to code something extra in, save the fact that you've got the humans for emergency scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
That there are layers and layers of coding that you're putting in, so after 3 attempts, please don't call me dude again. Or if this isn't working out, whatever it is, or if this has happened at 6 o'clock at night. How do you manage as a company the complexity of the code?
Well, so far, this is purely for the prototype, right? The prototype stage. When it gets to actual coding, we're going to have all kinds of escalation protocols. But I don't think it's too out there. If something's been repeated, if the question's repeated several times, obviously there's something wrong, something's not going right. We'll know that they're going to need to speak to someone. We're going to have to get out of that mess, which is something a lot of them don't do at the moment. You can just get stuck in a loop.
It's not a problem. It's not a problem, is what you're saying. The code is
it's not a problem
enough
yet.
that you're not having to spend hours and hours delving into the particular.
Well, we
use
don't
case.
have to at the moment. This is why we do the testing, right? This is why I'm saying we do a prototype first,
Okay.
because we can make these mistakes as much as we want.
Yeah.
And we can work out how many times we're going to have these problems and design for that already. And then the rest of the stuff happens once it's coded, yeah, but it's going to be a lot less. It's going to be a lot easier than going straight out and putting this product straight out in front of people.
Cool.
It's the same as how you would prototype normally, right, without an AI.
Anyone for a final question? Yeah, just at the back there.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Could you just go in a little bit more detail about your Wizard of Oz approach that you took to test out that chatbot? Because that sounded really interesting, but I noticed you blurred out the details and as much as you can talk about what you can talk
so you're talking about the bot brain we're talking about, yeah? It's stages. So the stages were originally going to be days, and we would take all different parts of our diagnostics and put them into these different stages. And we started off by asking these questions daily to each team member, and it was 5 or 6 questions, and maybe an exercise, maybe a game. And what we were actually finding was this was distracting people from their actual jobs so much that they were getting frustrated talking to us. We tried different levels of interaction, but we found that now we're averaging about once or twice a week we actually jump in and speak to these guys, and it's all at different times. But the reason we have this bot brain is we can adjust on a fly basis how many questions we're going to ask, what we're going to ask this week, what we're going to ask in this stage. And we can just chuck stuff in. If we suddenly have an idea and go, oh, this is going to work, we can put it in and test it. And we can take responses, and we collect all the responses we get. We had, for example, we've got things like someone went, sorry, bruv, it's been a mad one. How does an AI know what the hell's going on there? This is where you'd escalate it to a real person. But even those kind of responses go in, and we can just start to see how we're going to approach these problems. Yeah? I mean, I can speak to you about this properly afterwards if you want to.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Tom. Tom will be here at the end if you want to ask any other questions. But round of applause for Tom. Thanks very much.